Hey, everybody. This is Bishop John Seldis, and welcome to another edition of what we call Relevant Conversations. And we're here tonight to talk a little bit about the Poor People's Campaign. And I am happy and glad to be a part of what I believe is one of the relevant movements of our day and time. As most of you will remember, or some of you will remember, that Dr. King actually and a group of leaders initially from SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, began having conversations about what it might mean to mobilize in a broader way in the United States back in the 1960s. In fact, in 1967, it was really related to Dr. King's announcement, him coming out against the then Vietnam War, and then when I say them, he and the team of leaders began to think about what it might mean to begin to put pressure on what Dr. King referenced in his remarks back then in 1967. When he talked about the triplets of evil: militarism, materialism, and racism. And so it was in December of 1967 that Dr. King announced that the Poor People's Campaign would be launching. And he was teaming up with, in fact, 27, 28, 29 different groups, national groups across the country. He was making connections and was in conversation with Cesar Chavez and the farm workers out in California. He was in conversation with Dorothy Day and the work of the Catholic worker in urban centers across the United States, and many, many others. And the collaboration and coalition that was being built there in 1967 into 1968. And then, of course, he got invitation and a call to go to Memphis because there was some injustice going on there with sanitation workers, and ultimately led to his assassination April 4th, 1968, and thereby kind of putting a bit of a stall on the campaign that did ultimately happen, where they descended into Washington, D.C. For a brief period of time. And that was the beginning of the Poor People's Campaign. Fast forward some 50 years later, conversations began to happen once again with our partners and friends across the country, led by a bishop, colleague, and brother, Bishop William Barber, about maybe relaunching the Poor People's Campaign. And we jumped on board and got involved back in 2017. Many of you will remember. And it was at that time a big mass rally occurred in 2018, and we from then certainly have been doing work. We let a couple of people got arrested at the Capitol in the 2018, 2019, and we stepped away just a little bit from the national work, but felt the need to jump back in and be a part of the work that is now going on this year. And so we've been partnering in that work with our friends, our siblings, with the Episcopal Church, the Episcopal Church in Connecticut, the diocese office. And so we have one of our siblings who has joined us for this conversation. And I want to introduce her. She is the rector at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Ridgefield, Connecticut. I'm going to welcome in the Reverend Whitney Altop into this conversation. Come in and greet the folk.
Thank you, Bishop John, and hello all. I am the Reverend Whitney Altop, and I apologize at the outset here for greeting you from my car. This was not how today was supposed to go, but we all know about those kind of days. So, and that is really what gives me joy to be a part of this effort with the Poor People's Campaign and partnering with Bishop John and all of you all that have already begun this work here in our state. You know, we're trying to do a big heavy lift in this nation and right some wrongs and make some corrections. And there are lots of obstacles in the way, but showing up for each other is what God can work with. And I have to remember that myself, and I hope that each of you are remembering that too. So even if you're calling from your car or whatever your circumstance, but if you just try, then God has something to work with. So anyway, I'm not sure what all details. I can talk forever. I'm a clergy person, so I can just keep going. But Bishop John, do you have anything you want me to say or talk about before I just keep going?
Sure, I can jump in just
the road
for a
in
moment.
front of me is long, so I can just fill it all up.
That's okay.
Okay, great.
You and I both can chat it up a bit, so that's okay. What I want to say to folk from the onset is that we got into conversation back in, I guess it must have been late March, early April, about the possibility of being in partnership with one another. Around the Poor People's Campaign and the march that is going to occur in less than a week. We'll be in Washington. So and let me back up just a little bit to say that in our work earlier with the Poor People's Campaign, what we noticed and what we began to talk about here in Connecticut are two distinctive Connecticut's. We touted this state touts itself and will refer to itself as one of the richest states per capita in the country, and that's true. That's absolutely true. Yet we also have the claim that we have some of the poorest cities in the nation. Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven are some of the poorest. Now, you know, some might ask, how can these things coexist at the same time? Well, I think it's relevant to what the report was back in the 1960s. The Keener report that said there are two Americas. There's a rich, you know, wealthy, well-off America, and then there's a very poor, impoverished America. And I think, you know, here we are decades later, and we can say that certainly here in Connecticut. And there's some starkness to that. As I began to do the work that we were doing earlier on with Moral Monday and linking it to the Poor People's Campaign a number of years ago, to discover For example, here in Hartford, I live in Hartford. The average income for a family of four was somewhere under $25,000 annually. That you can't even think in terms of that. Those of us who are so-called middle class. Not let me just own the fact that if I miss a couple of paychecks, I'm in the poor form too. And I think many of us would find ourselves in some fiscal trouble if we missed a couple of paychecks. So I think that ought to be said. And quite frankly, for me, while I understand that in some senses, in some cases, um, um, those of us, especially of faith, feel a little, and we've heard this before. We've heard people say, "Well, I don't know if I can speak for people who are low wealth or low income," and I say, no, that's not the object is not to speak for. The object is to speak about your faith and what I would call the moral call, which is what the Poor People's Campaign is. It's a national call for a moral revival. It's to recover in this case the sense of right and wrongness that is obvious to the fact that I think it is somewhat antithetical of the gospel. When the gospel asks of us, Jesus said it. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you came to see about me. And then the disciples in that particular gospel pericope, the disciples said, "When were you hungry, or when were you naked, or when were you in prison?" And then Jesus said, when you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. I think there is a gospel mandate, a gospel call to speak about what are rights and wrongs in that way. You got anything to say about that, Reverend Alton?
Yeah, I appreciate the reminder of this the length of time we've been talking about this, if you will. I mean, we being a royal we, because it's covered several generations. But your point about Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference starting this 50 years ago, we now have the, dare I say, benefit, because it doesn't feel good. Benefits usually feel good. Doesn't feel good. But we have the benefit of recognizing that this is a systemic problem. It hasn't gone away. If it could be solved by just good people trying to be nice to each other, we would have a different outcome. But now we know that even the point you're making about two Connecticut's is a systemic issue. And one thing that I was encouraged by someone saying once is, it was policy that got us into this, and it's policy that can get us out. And so how do we allow our faith to inform our policy decisions? Because that's how our nation works, or doesn't, in regard to government. And bringing our faith into this, I think, is really, we even have examples of that in our gospel lessons. Just a reminder that the system isn't built for people. And so Jesus's teachings tell us we have to interrupt the system in order to care for those, for people's humanity. So I think that allowing our faith to inform our actions is something I hope we can keep encouraging ourselves in and not be afraid of it, so that God can actually do something with the good people that we are, wanting to see a different way.
I think that's absolutely true. And what I find that is maybe lacking, or may need to be, and I'm speaking, the we is people of faith, people of conscience, people of goodwill. I'm reminded of what Dr. King said. He said, made this comment in reference to when those clergy persons in Birmingham wrote him a letter publicly and said, You're taking us too fast. Um, if you can slow down a little bit, I know we got some problems. We can work it out if we give us some time. And could you wait just a few minutes, a few years, few decades more? And Dr. King said, the time is now. It's no longer the time to wait. I couldn't. When getting the invitation, I couldn't sit idly by, in Atlanta by this point, while there was something going on in Birmingham that a call went out and said, could I help? Could I pay some attention to it? Could I presence myself and the work that we do toward this effort? And then it was at that point in his letter from a Birmingham jail, he said that we are tied together in a mutual garment of destiny, right? He said that I could not be in Atlanta and watch injustice happen over here. A threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? And so it is in that context that we have to now maybe fortify ourselves, stiffen our back, and go grab some courage and speak truth, even as that truth indicts ourselves. And I believe in many instances it's that truth-telling moment where, oh, it's not my brother, it's not my sister, it's not anybody else, it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. If I could reference that Negro spiritual in him. It's those of us who actually, Dr. King said this as well. He said, I'm not so much concerned about the folk with the, on the other side. It's the good folk who don't say anything, right? It's not the Klan or the White Citizens Council that I'm real concerned about. They'll do their part, right? But it's the good people who sit idly by and say nothing that somehow is of more concern to me and to this work. So I believe it is at that point and at that moment that those of us who are of faith, those of us who are conscious, those of us who have a leaning and a tendency, and we'll do the right thing. I think now we need a little push.
Yeah. I love you bringing up King showing up in Birmingham, because just to humanize the moment, he went at a request and he just showed up. I mean, I know that he had people that he knows and skills and, connections, but we have referenced that letter from Birmingham jail so much over these 50 years, and it came out of him showing up, and it came out of the trials of that time. And we're still being inspired by his words, and it originated in his willingness to just go. And in going, he found the courage in the people that were fighting there. He was weary, he was worn, and he still showed up because that's what he knew he at least could do. And we don't have to be, and we can't be Dr. King, but I want us to remember the significance of showing up, that is when God can work with us. And we don't even know what will come from that, because he didn't know what would come from that. That wasn't the first time that he was imprisoned, but it was where the letter got written. So I really value that remembrance for all of our sake in the significance of showing up, because then God can do something with us, and we don't have to know exactly how it's going to go. And we get the courage from each other in the showing up. It starts to get multiplied and miraculously created in our relationships with one another. And that feels like a gift from God, I think.
It absolutely does. So here's something else. What I've noticed in my 20 plus years here doing faithful work in the church, in faith communities, and in the public square. It's easy, or let me make a statement and see what your response is. It's easy to tout, you know, what that faith looks like, and to find voice around it when we're inside the four walls of our communities of faith. What's a little more difficult to do is to do a little more truth telling in the public square, to enter into spaces and places where we don't have the choir, we don't have the amen corner in my setting. You know, I know with the Episcopalians, y'all quiet in the church, y'all a little quiet. But where I come from, you know, we're a little more noisier in church. And if I'm talking good, somebody's gonna say amen or something. They're gonna acknowledge it. I've come to be comforted by the smiles and the warm faces and regards in the more quiet setting. So I kind of get the sense of the ebb and flow of worship. But I tell people all the time, I'm a Black preacher and I'm trained in the Black tradition. So you got to talk to me a little bit. I need to know instantly how I'm doing. So, however, so in that context, I have found it a bit difficult, or I find our colleagues and our siblings to find, you know, not find our voice so readily, and not be as willing to take the risk to show up, or to allow what our faith, what we pledge in our statements of and faith and our affirmations, and then what do they mean when it's in the real world in real time? Could you react and respond?
Yeah, well, I like to tell my people that Jesus always went outside of the boundaries, and it is uncomfortable out there. So, how can we get comfortable with being uncomfortable? How do we follow Jesus beyond the margins? Because he was always outside of the socially acceptable boundaries. He didn't know what he was going to face out there either. And I'm encouraged by his life and demonstration. And I do believe that when we go outside of the boundaries, we find Jesus there, because that is where Jesus is. And I think Reverend Barber and Reverend Liz Theo Harris, they both brought that to our attention over and over again. And they encourage me anyway, to you know, they're out there, I should just go stand beside them, you know. Who knows what the moment will provide or what I'll experience, but the point of learning to be comfortable in being uncomfortable, because Jesus did that all the time, and I think that is one of the ways we follow him, is to go beyond our comfortable boundaries into the unknown.
Absolutely. So here's another thing. We are going to be journeying together down to Washington, D.C., and doing what those of us in faith would call an action of public witness. How am I doing? An action of public witness, right? Yeah. So we're gonna be on the mall, in our national mall in Washington, D.C., and this particular gathering and march, this rally and march, have a couple of focuses. One, it obviously, because we are the Poor People's Campaign, we're going to be talking about, you know, low wage workers and the continued struggle as we're now in this era of this pandemic era. I can't say that we're post-pandemic, because we're not post, I don't think. And that there is, you know, who would have thought when this thing first, you know, jumped off in the first quarter of 2020, that we'd still be talking about, you know, the coronavirus and COVID-19. So none of us really understood what was going down and what was happening, what we were getting ready to be faced with. And while now we're in this moment where prices are skyrocketing. I mean, I went to the gas station the other day and put gas in the car, and it kept going. And I was like, wait a minute, we done went past what I normally pay. And we went way past it, right? And maybe you're like me. Have you noticed you buy fewer groceries and you spend more money.
Mm-hmm.
So and I'm having to pay, my family, we're having to pay attention to that in a way we hadn't had to pay attention before in some time. So there's, and have you also noticed that you haven't gotten more money necessarily? The the rate of pay has not equaled our expenses. So that economically, the vast majority of citizens and those of us who are citizens in Connecticut, we're paying more and really getting less. So this gathering is a conversation to the nation and to our leaders in Congress and in this government to say, boy, we better pay attention to the low wage workers and their plight right now. But then, too, secondly, there is a need, as we've also understood it, to address what I would call the polarization that also exists in this moment. That it seems like to me that we shouldn't be having an argument about should people, should they want somewhere to live, they ought to be able to have somewhere to live. I think that's just what's right from my perspective. I think if people are hungry, they ought to be able to get somewhere to eat, something to eat. I think if people want to work, a living wage job ought to be there for them. So we are going to Washington, D.C. to speak to those two things in relationship to speaking to the nation and speaking to our government. And in particular, saying to them, we recognize how you get to be in government. Most often you get there because we have voted you in there. All right. And so there's a need for us to go to the polls. All right. And I care secondarily who you vote for. I want to know, are you registered to vote? And will you come and vote? Will you vote? And so we're also going to be using this opportunity to speak to the ways in which we ought to be now helping our brothers and sisters, our siblings, members in our own communities to register and head to the polls and vote. So those are the two things we are bound to do in Washington, D.C. How am I doing?
You're doing great. And your point about gas prices and everything. When we reserved a bus back in, I think it was in February of this year, there was already news of, maybe this was already after Russia invaded Ukraine, and we were aware that gas prices were, unstable. And I remember one of our leaders in our team saying, we better lock in that bus because the price is going to go up if we wait. And so we have. And I just want to encourage anybody who's on this, listening to us, that we do have spaces still on the bus to go down to DC, taking off from 4 different points in our state. And I know that Bishop John has all the information about that, so I'm not going to try to remember it all. But there is a location near you that you can get on that bus, and we have not changed the price. It hasn't changed, and there is scholarship money available. And we are going to be sitting next to each other, and you do need to be vaccinated and have a mask. But let's not let the things, our fears of this world, keep us from working on the things that really we all need. And it would just be horrible if the economy is actually the reason that nobody could go down and fight for the economy, for people that are being, shaped, and all of us are being shaped, but some different ways more than others. We want to show up for each other. And so I just really want to encourage you to take these baby steps of being in close proximity with a person again, or with people, and being inspired. We're going to be inspired by what happens on Saturday, because we will see all the people we're connected to. And once we start to see some faces, we'll remember why we go through all this effort to register to vote and to talk to each other and to show up to vote, and to all of the hard work of being in relationship and in community with each other. Maybe I'll just stop there for now.
Sure. So you're right. I have the information. I'm going to share it we're gonna pick up folk in 4 locations throughout the state of Connecticut: Manchester, Hartford, New Haven, and Fairfield. There are 4 spots available to you. We will begin our trek to Washington, D.C. on late Friday night. Into early Saturday morning. And we'll make a stop or two. We're riding on coach bus, so the pit stops can be made at your need. And we will arrive early Saturday morning in Washington, D.C., and then make our way to the mall for the rally. The rally will begin at 10 a.m. And then after the rally, I anticipate somewhere between 2 and 3 o'clock, we're going to find our bus and we're going to get on back to Connecticut. And I anticipate that our whole trip will probably be a 24-hour or so turnaround. And that only is the beginning, because what I'm going to suggest to you is that we'll get some marching orders. And then we have agreed that the Poor People's Campaign, the Connecticut Poor People's Campaign, should be active for the foreseeable future. And so what our plan is, in fact, is we are in conversations now with the national setting of the Poor People's Campaign to reactivate the Connecticut Poor People's Campaign chapter, and then provide some leadership. And we're prayerful that the Episcopal Church of Connecticut will partner with us. They've already said yes, and if they didn't say yes, I'm claiming that in the spirit. Yes, we've been to some conversations, and so
exactly
we're going to join forces along with some key other leaders around this state and begin to do our work. Let me can I just broadcast a little bit about what I think the work is in the coming months.
Yes, and I do want to give a quick shout out to Canon Ranjit Matthews, who's my co-chair. I mean, he's the one on our diocesan staff, and he wasn't able to be here tonight, but I just want to recognize his commitment, our commitment in leading this diocese. And so I just need to give a shout out to him. That's all.
Shout out to Canon Matthews. He in fact hit me up just a little while ago via text and said, "Man, I can't make it. I'm doing too many things." Aren't we all doing too many things? That's the sign of some good folk that are faithful folk, when they got a whole bunch of irons in the fire. And so I'm appreciative of not only the two of you, Reverend Altop, but the committees that have worked faithfully over these last several months to ensure that the transportation is provided, that there's a conversation afoot in the Episcopal Church, particularly around this effort and what we may do as we move from Saturday into the summer and into this fall. Let me do a little casting out from this place because of what I think are very real concerns and needs. Listen, the reason we're in some of the mess that we're in is because of some of the people who we have elected that then don't do what we had hoped they would do. I was asked the other day, the person said, "Bishop, are you being partisan here?" Well, what I'm being is selective about my values. And I think it is people of faith can be very particular about what our values are. Listen, as I've named already, I think it is mandated by the gospel as a follower of Jesus in the way to suggest that we've got work to do when it comes to the least of these, right? So it's just, for me, when we're talking, what is right and fair, what is righteous, right? I'll use faith language for those of you who need some faithy language. Righteousness is an important, concept for those of us who are of faith. And I'm not just talking about Christians, Jewish folk, Muslims, And other traditions value these same things, the giving of alms. You can't be a good Muslim if you don't give to the poor. So it is in that context that we've got to decide, and I think we do it. I think, what's wrong in our civic and social world, the plans for writing that will not just drop out of heaven. They happen because we make them happen. The government, the form of government that we have, this so-called democracy that we claim we are participants in, happen because we make them happen, right? And so if it's something wrong, fix it, right? A friend of mine, colleague, says to me, "Fix it, Felix," all the time. Fix it, Felix. So it's incumbent upon us, and those values have to line up. But if people are not, in fact, who we elect, are not then acting in ways that match up with those values, well, we got to get somebody else in there that will, in fact, respond to the calls and to the letters and the emails saying, "This is what I think we ought to do. I hope you're doing the right thing there." I thought you were going to say something, Reverend.
I'm just amening you. I'm in your corner.
All right. Well, listen, thank the Lord. I got an amen corner tonight. So what we have done, Mohammed CT, along with CT Black Women and a whole host of other of our partners over the last several years, we've been in partnership around making sure we had the correct information, that we would share the right stuff around our processes of registering to vote and then going to the polls to vote. There were several commitments this state has made in regard to the vote, and so here we are now. This particular year, we will be electing the constitutional officers of this state. That is the governor, the lieutenant governor, the treasurer, and the secretary of the state. All right, along with all of our state legislators, the state senators, and our state representatives. So there's some work to do here, because it is those are the folk who are responsible for writing law and setting public policy for the state of Connecticut. And I just think we ought to be mindful of the values those folk hold that are core to who we are. And in faith communities, we ought not be so ashamed to say, just a moment, please. This is what I value. Here's what we value, and we get to decide what we want and who we want and what it is that we want in this day and time. You want to respond to that?
Yes. I'm remembering a conversation you and I and Canon Ranjit had some time ago, just about, the challenges of Connecticut and its regionalism. And I'm remembering that in the context of having a conversation even with a local person in our town who said when our town wanted to see something happen, then the state finally started to work on it. And I think one of the things I hope comes out of Saturday and then all the months coming is some real connection between us on a regional level to make some governmental changes in our regions that can then influence people at the statewide level. It doesn't, this is just adding on to what you're saying about our need to consider the state people who are running for office and how they reflect our values. And that being said, I'm adding on this other piece that we talked about earlier about regionalism and making connections with one another in our local communities to get things changed. And there's power in that too. So we have a lot available to us, to a lot of levers that can help change the picture in Connecticut. We don't have only one road to get us there. We have several different platforms or, networks or whatever you want to call them. And we're going to be discovering those together, as you have said, that we're the ones that have to do it. And I have a lot of trust that God has given us each other to figure it out. And that as we work together, we will indeed figure it out. And it can't happen unless we work together. And I do have a lot of confidence and trust in our capacity for that. A belief in, if God believes in us, then I'm going to try to do my best to believe in us too. And I think that's the way I want to go about it.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Let's talk again just for a moment. Let's go back to the trip itself this coming Saturday. There is still a limited space available.
Right.
We do want you to come. If you want to
Yes.
come,
Yes.
don't let money be your drawback. Just come on. Here's what we're going to need you to do. However, we're going to need you to register. You will get all of the pertinent information via registration. The exact place where the pickups are going to occur, and all of the pertinent information if you would register. Now, there are a couple of places to do that. Since this is my show, this is our show, I'm gonna tell you to go to moremoneyct.org and click on the messages around the Poor People's Campaign, and right center. If you read down, scroll down just a little bit, there is a link that you click on that'll take you to the Episcopal Church's Eventbrite site. That's a mouthful right there. Eventbrite site, and there is all the pertinent information to register name and give you all the details. What to bring. We need a vaccination card. We'll be checking that'll be being checked. Mask up. Bring some snacks. Bring some water. We're gonna be rallying and walking and marching. So take care of yourself the best you can. And we'll stop. We're gonna stop along the way as well. And come on back here in one piece. Amen.
Amen. And can I put in a word here about scholarships?
Yes.
And I might need some detail from you. Just want to let folks know the ticket is kind of steep. It's $85, but we have scholarships, 50%, 75%, and 100% scholarships. We just need you to I guess, Bishop John, should they just let you know if they need it?
Yes.
If we can give them the code?
Yes.
And I want to say there are people that really believe in this but couldn't go because of health reasons, or they're just too old to march anymore, or whatever the thing is, who have given money for scholarships because of their commitment to seeing people get there. So please don't let that stand in your way, the money part. We just need to find a way for money to not be standing in the way of working together. And I want you to know there is definitely scholarship money available for folks. So the only thing you need to do is let Bishop John know you need it. And that way then we can give you the right number to put into your registration. There's a 50% off and the 75% off and 100% off. So that 100% off, of course, means you go for free. But we need you to tell us. So anyway, please communicate that. We're closing the registration in just a couple days because we have to make sure we can keep up with everything. But the other thing I want to add is you definitely can bring food on the bus. Bring your pillow. You can leave it on there. They'll bring your sandwich, whatever it is. You can leave things on the bus that you're not worried about. So don't leave anything of value on there. But just everything that Bishop John just said, I just want to emphasize again, we really want folks to go because you will be encouraged if you go. And we all need that encouragement. This is long and arduous work, and we need each other. We need to see each other's faces, and we need to be able to hear each other's voices and hear each other's stories. And I don't know how you'll be blessed by going on this trip, but I am 100% sure you'll be blessed. So just let Bishop John know if you need a scholarship.
Absolutely. It is. Money should not be your obstacle or barrier for this trip. And let us know, be in touch with us, and we can make the trip happen for you if you want to go.
Yes.
We're looking forward to what I believe Spirit God is going to meet us in Washington D.C. And I think the challenge may be to put yourself in the way of the blessing of the Almighty. That might be
Amen. Yes.
the
Yes.
challenge. There is something. I'm remembering, the call story of Moses. Moses, who was a prince of Egypt, who then had a reality check and found out his identity was hidden to him for a while, and he fled because he reacted and responded in particular ways, and had built a life off somewhere else, and he was doing that thing that he was there then called to do, and God spoke to him through a bush that wouldn't be consumed. It was burning, but it wouldn't burn up. And he said to Moses, I need you to go down there and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And he said, listen here, God, I can't go down there to tell Pharaoh anything. I stutter. And he had lots of excuses. And God mediated those excuses. And then ultimately, those of us who are a little bit churchy and a little bit synagogue-y, we know the rest of the story. Moses then went down and talked to the prince, who was in fact probably his brother, or at least was raised as his brother. They were kin in the story, and ultimately, well, we know the rest of the story of that.
Yes.
That so for me, the principle is we might have some excuses. There may be some things that you might say, hey, this will keep me from. But I believe if you say yes, there is a yes available for you. Mm-hmm. And if in fact the trip is not your yes, right? There are multiple yeses here. If the trip is not your yes, we too have yes. There have been people who have donated to us and said, hey, I can't go, but here's $5 to help somebody else go. And that's a yes too. There are others of us who say, hey, I can't go on this trip, but Reverend Altoff and Bishop Selders, I'll join you out here on the line. I will commit to being in touch with you around the next steps, and there will be some next steps. Here in Connecticut, we have an interesting thing that happens. People turn into political, all kinds of political people turn up around September and October, right before the elections in November. It's a thing here. I hadn't quite felt it in the way that I have experienced it here in Connecticut. But in late August and then September and October, it becomes, it turns on politics around here. And so that's the opportunity for us, not only to hear from candidates, but also to have candidates hear from us. And to have voters say, hey, what's that we got to do to get registered? What are the steps we need to take? Can I get a ride to the poll? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is the time now to be active and to be engaged civically. And I believe it is a moral responsibility. Hear me clearly. It is something right that I believe we ought to be challenged with, to participate. Much of the work of Dr. King down south around race and racism and white supremacy was in and around making sure people could vote. The Voting Rights Act that was ultimately passed in 1964 was about just that. And it's taken a couple of hits, in the last 10 years or so. So it is our time now to participate, to be involved, and to figure out what that involvement means, and have that line up with what we believe and what we think we believe and what we espouse we believe in a way. Reverend Altoff, I'm gonna give you the last word. We are about at time here. So what do you say to folk as we move to our conclusion of our conversation tonight?
Well, building upon what you just said and our civic duty, and it's God that completes it. One of the things that we say in the Episcopal Church when we are faced with a challenge is we say, I will with God's help. And I love to remember that God always helps. God always helps, always. And so we have a partner in this world that always shows up for us, even if we don't know exactly how. And so I just want to, the things we're facing are beyond our comprehension about how to solve it. And it can make us weary and frustrated and just resigned, and maybe even numb or burned out. And I simply want to say, God can transform this current situation if we can just show up and just do the part we can do. And I always want I want to see God do the miracles. So I hope you do too. And I just appreciate you being on this call and your interest and even the work you've done before. Perhaps if you're listening tonight and you've been a part of this and you are kind of maybe reflecting on the fact that we're only here, quote unquote, rather than somewhere better, or further down the road. Just let the loving God, attend to you and remind you that the story's not over yet. And what God can do with people who are willing to show up is is beyond our comprehension. So I hope we can move forward in faith and do the only thing that we know how to do, which is to show up and do the task at hand so that God can work in and through us and bring about the change that He's placed in our hearts of wanting to see, our desire to see all God's people cared for in a way that recognizes their full humanity and allows them to live in a thriving way in community.
I believe it is it is the most important thing that we could be doing in response to what I believe is the call of God, to be of service, to serve in the midst of these trying and in many ways troubling times. You all you need to do is go grab the paper out in the yard, or flick on your television, or jump in the car and turn the radio on, and you will hear, from mass shootings to the police involved shootings, to the unemployment rates, and while people may be employed, at what rate are they getting paid? That we still are talking about a living wage here in Connecticut. We passed in a fairly tumultuous, discussion and debate. We passed, $15 an hour as at least the minimum wage. Let's be real honest. It costs about $25 an hour to get that up to a standard of a living for real wage. So we still got work to do. And for us here in Connecticut, there's also sometimes maybe not the urgency to act. Okay, we'll get to it. While some of us are living, quite frankly, in urgent times. The pace is sped up, and so my invitation and really my call and plea to you is to, when you see us somewhere, message us, get involved in some kind of way, share a post, begin a discussion group in your community, in your faith community, or in your social org. How can we be a contributor in the discussion and in the very real reality that there are folk who live in this state who are not living up to what I would call anything that really, quite frankly, anybody should be living. Right. Their wage is low. I don't know too many people who don't want to work. Right. I don't know. I don't. People want to make money. People want to take care of their families. People want to find. They want adequate, affordable housing. They do want to be in a place that actually recognizes their dignity and their humanity. That's it. That's it.
Mhm.
And so
That's right.
it is incumbent upon us, I think, to be in that conversation, to be a witness
Yes.
and be a contributor
Yes.
in these times, here in Connecticut and across this country, and in fact across the world.
Yes.
I, I,
Amen.
I hear the book of Acts say, be you witness in Jerusalem,
That's right.
Judea,
That's right.
Samaria, and then the uttermost parts of the earth. So that work of being a witness, that work of public witnessing, are to start at home. And so here's
That's
an
right.
opportunity for those of us who are in the state of Connecticut, across this state, from Stamford to New London, from Fairfield all the way up to Enfield. We ought to be engaged in some way around what this actually means for real people. The policies and the commitments, the laws that are made have at the end of that real people and real people's lives. And I think it is incumbent upon us to speak to what we believe are important values to be lifted up in this time. All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Reverend Althoff.
Thank you,
sharing your
Bishop
car
Salters.
ride with us and being in conversation with us. We look forward to what the work has for us in this new reality. We're coming real soon to where you live, to where you are, to your community in this conversation around the Poor People's Campaign and what we ought to be doing in relationship to low wage folk and wealth in this place and space. Thank you again. God bless you, and we'll see you real soon. All right.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it, everybody.
Thank you very much. We'll talk soon.